Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. It's been a little while since I've done a vlog, so I like to do these things every now and again just to keep people posted on what's going on and what's going to be happening over the next few weeks. Let's talk about what I'm trying to do with the channel right now. You might notice there's been a few changes. The first one, of course, being the big change to the YouTube 1 design. I don't know, there's parts of it that I like and there's parts of it that I don't like, honestly. For a channel like this that's very much based on series, yeah, I do different series, as you're well aware. WTF is, Content Patch, Hyper Incompetent, Single Draft Disaster, Game Station Podcast, and so on and so forth. So, if I'm doing a show like that, having this kind of shelf design is pretty good. If you go to the front page of the channel, youtube.com/cynicalbrit, and you go on there, then it's pretty easy to find stuff. It's pretty difficult to miss it, honestly. You get all of the recent uploads right there, so you can clearly see what came out over the last few days. And then you can look at WTF is and Content Patch and just click on the latest. And that seems to work pretty well. I think that's pretty good. There are some downsides to it. In fact, there's an awful lot of downsides to it. The fact that it's hideous definitely does not help. We kind of went with this very minimalist design on the actual top banner because really, what's the point in doing anything else? Everything else is just white space. So we might as well. If we just added a bunch of color up there, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. It would just stand out like a sore thumb. YouTube's idea about making content individual and allowing channels to customize themselves, well, they threw that out the window, didn't they? You are a unique and beautiful snowflake, just as long as you look like everything else. Plus, quite frankly, the shelf design, while it's practical, doesn't look that great. It's just a giant stack of content. And it seems like there would be way, way better ways to actually browse your way through that. Ill-conceived, I've got to say. Thankfully, it doesn't seem to have affected the channel in any real negative sense of the word. I was a little bit concerned it may cause a drop in views or something like that. No, it didn't really do anything like that at all, so that's all good. Not really too worried about that. Let's talk about content. What have I been doing? I've been trying to change things up just a little bit. You've probably noticed that there's been a couple of different series that have sprung out, as well as a few one-off videos that I've been doing over the last few weeks. Let's start with Early Look. Early Look exists because WTF is a really bad format for games that are not at least mostly complete. Because WTF is focused on the idea of explanation and critique, right? I'm trying to analyze the title. I'll be overly critical when I can be because I think that helps people make proper purchase decisions, yeah? If I'm too kind to a game when it doesn't deserve it, then I can end up misleading people, and misleading people into spending money on stuff that sucks is a really bad way to do business, I tend to find. The problem is, you can't really be hypercritical with games like that because they're very much in a state of flux. A lot of the design decisions that you see in alphas end up being changed by the time the game actually comes out. The term alpha, and of course even the term beta, have very much been changed over the past couple of years, I feel. The language has been muddied. Getting into a beta these days is more like saying, hey, here's a demo. And especially on consoles, a lot of the time these open betas are just demos. They're like, here's the beta, but there's nowhere to leave feedback. How can this be a beta test? And it's just like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Ugh. But real alpha and real beta tests do very much exist, and I think we're swinging back around to that. Noticed over the past couple of years that we had that big period of beta is just demo, back to, oh, beta is actually beta, right, there will actually be real changes there. Now, I've noticed, and this is, I think, a problem with my back catalogue, that a lot of the videos that I've done in the past few years over certain titles are of beta content, or even earlier than that, and then there isn't any follow-up coverage. There's a couple of titles that I think are guilty of that. A couple of things that spring to mind is stuff like Path of Exile, also things like, say, Natural Selection to some degree, although I feel that the video was mostly accurate. Obviously, it's been updated since. And then there's titles like Torchlight as well, and there are some more extreme examples. Now, I think that putting those videos as part of the WTF is series is kind of a disservice to the viewers, because I feel that the brand has gotten so strong now, and it's got so many viewers behind it, that WTF is used as a reference guide for purchase decisions an awful lot. And if that happens, and the only video available there is actually of something that, quite frankly, is nowhere near complete, then it's not that useful to people. So what I want Early Look to be, or whatever it is that I decide to name it, is part of an ongoing process of coverage for certain titles. The ability to cover something earlier, but in a format that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to critique something at such an early stage. It makes sense to explore it, look at it as a concept, look at the potential, and then suggest improvements or different directions in design. If there's a particular mechanic that I really dislike and I can come up with a reason for it, then maybe that gets changed, and hopefully that's a little bit of a positive force, even if in such a small way. It also gives people a chance, of course, to check out really new stuff and get an inside glimpse into things which are very much still in development, and I think that's valuable. PAX coverage didn't do all that well, but the initial video that I did in this series, Planetary Annihilations, are 200,000 views now, so that's pretty strong. War for the Overworld, I don't really know, because those couple of days we had some weird view issues, as far as I can tell, where videos had about half of what I would have expected, and it was only on those 2 days, June the 12th and June the 13th, so that's really weird, but whatever the case, I think that it's probably a series that will do pretty well. And I think that it's valuable because it just lets me separate all of that alpha stuff from the real critique. So I can keep WTF is for final or close to final products. Now, I do need a better name for it because I mean, come on, the least inspired name for any series I've ever done. An early look at. I mean, not only does that sound way too much like Giant Bomb's Quick Looks, and I definitely wouldn't want to clash with them. It needs something more. It needs to be inspired. WTF is a great brand, in my opinion. It's something that you would just search for. But I don't know. I'm trying to come up with something. I think, honestly, that it's something that maybe you guys can help me with. If you come up with an idea, feel free to leave it in the description below. Hey, maybe I'll pick it. If I do, I'll try and give you a bunch of games. Seems like a reasonable piece of compensation. But whatever the case, I will come up with a name for it at some point, but I wanted to explain the difference between my regular series and that one. There will be a lot more of that stuff because a lot more developers are sending me really early code, so I would like to use that series to explore that code in a little bit less of a critical environment as opposed to what WTF is would be, where I just like tear it to pieces because it wasn't finished or whatever. Okay, other piece of content on the channel, redubs. This one was a little bit controversial, and I'd like to address a few things. So, first things first, were they inspired by the stuff that was done over on videogamer.com? A bit. Although the funny thing is that content by Matt Lees, which is hilarious by the way, and you should all go and watch it because it's just great, was more of a reminder as opposed to an inspiration. It's the kind of thing that I used to do an awful lot back when I did just podcasting, and this whole kind of parody content and the snarking and the sarcastic stuff, that was actually a basis of this very channel back when I did World of Warcraft. I did a lot of little things like that. And when I did my podcasts, like Blue Please, for instance, I had something called Nubcake News, which was very much a parody style of doing things, and I did a lot of satire on current events, and the recent uptake in popularity of that kind of content reminded me, oh yeah, I used to do that, maybe I should do that again. A lot of people are doing these highlight reels or redubs of these conferences, so it's hardly a new concept, but at the end of the day, I wanted to do it because it reminded me of the stuff that I used to do. And I'm going to be honest, I think over the past 6 months, the channel has become very, very serious in tone. And I like that because I think that there aren't that many gaming channels that are. A lot of gaming channels are very much based on having fun and doing this and doing that. And you might think, well, why would you not have a gaming channel about having fun? It's video games. Yes, but you don't necessarily get good information in that respect. You can, but more often than not, it leans more towards the cult of personality thing and less in the quality of the information and the content. So, yeah, I don't really like that style overall. But on the flip side, if you get too serious and you go too far away from your roots, then you alienate your original fan base. The kind of guys that used to listen to me back on WoW Radio with Blue Please were into the snark and they were into the sarcasm and the parody stuff. And so, some of it was outright ridiculous. Hell, we used to do an improv show on our show Epic a long time ago, which was nothing but myself and my co-host Kiki Jiki doing improv comedy as two Murlocs on an adventure. And you know what, I listened back to some of that stuff, and some of it makes me cringe, and some of it still makes me roll with laughter, because I remember how fun it was making it. Redubs are a lot of fun to make, but don't get me wrong, they're not necessarily easy to make. Some people accused me of lazy content. It's funny that people would say that when it's very edit heavy. I mean, editing down a 2-hour conference to 4 minutes is extremely time consuming. Not only, of course, do you have to watch the entire thing, sometimes multiple times while taking notes and time codes and so on and so forth, but then you have to record each individual line. You've got to make sure it's exactly timed out, and then you've got to make sure the edits are snappy. It takes a lot of work. There was a lot of edits in those conferences. So compare that to something like WTF Is, where it's generally a lot of research and then a single take. It's actually a lot harder to make something like that than it is to make an episode of WTF Is, or in some cases even Content Patch. So it's definitely not easy or lazy content, but it is also the kind of humor that some people simply will not enjoy, and that's okay. I've said this time and again, whenever anyone's asked me for advice in terms of how to run a YouTube channel, the first thing I will ever say is quite simply, don't try and cater to everybody. If you try to please everybody, especially at the expense of your identity, then you're not going to end up pleasing many people at all. It's something that you've got to bear in mind when you're making a channel. You have to cement your identity and your personality in the minds of people, and at that point, then people will come to you because they recognize what you are. You're constant. You're consistent, and they recognize whether or not they want to watch your content or they don't. There are unquestionably enough people that want to watch the redubs to keep doing them. The numbers are very, very strong. The feedback has, for the most part, been universally positive, aside from the odd, oh, you copied this, you copied that, or alternatively, I don't think you're funny. It doesn't really matter. There are jokes that I will find funny, there are jokes that I won't find funny, there are jokes that I thought were kind of lame, but ended up resonating really well with some people. The nature of humor is so incredibly subjective, and as a direct result, I really just have to look at the graphs. That's how I make decisions. I look at the graphs, I look at the numbers, and I try and figure things out from there. And I do read the feedback, but needless to say, I do take it with a pinch of salt. The redubs are doing really well, so I'll keep doing them. I'm looking to do one of the Ubisoft conference. It's a lot longer a conference than the EA one, so it'll be interesting. But there's also a lot of weirdness that went on during the Ubisoft conference, so that might be interesting. The Sony conference, really long. I would love to do it if I can get the time to do it. It will take a long time to put something together for that. And some might argue that it's not really relevant, but looking at the EA one, you'd think that after a week that one isn't relevant either, but people watched it anyway. And then after that's done, I think that it really opens the door to go back to what redub originally was. If some people might even remember, the first redub I did was about a year ago. It was of the trailer for Blacklight Retribution. I want to do more little snippet pieces like that, something a little bit shorter. I do a lot of long content, 15 to 30 to 45 minute videos, and it's nice to be able to put out just a little video that people can watch while they have a couple of minutes to spare, and I think redub is a good opportunity to do that. So hopefully videos of trailers and sarcastic redubs and things like that, and yeah, it seems to be going well. I think that there's no harm in adding variety to a variety gaming channel, right? It's why I've put a few videos of Scrolls up recently, which seem to do really well. I actually really enjoy doing the Scrolls videos because I like talking through my thought process, even if the thought process ends up being wrong. I personally find it interesting to do, and once again, the views are looking pretty good on that one. So I think that we'll just keep doing Scrolls videos every now and again. And hopefully that will keep the variety up. I've been keenly aware that I feel the channel has been getting a bit stale lately with an over-reliance on Content Patch and WTF Is, which I think is fine, because it's that regularity that really helps people, it's that consistency, but if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and if you don't think about how you can expand your borders, as it were, and look to different styles and different formats, then you will stagnate, you will fall down. We had to transition out of the World of Warcraft content, and that was rough. It really, really was. So the channel could have just failed completely. I could have gone back to work at the financial advisory, which wouldn't have been fun for anybody. But as it turns out, we survived that by adapting, by creating new formats, and I'm going to keep doing that. And people seem to be liking it an awful lot, so it's nice. I'm feeling good about the channel these days. I really am. I was having some doubts about it, but things are feeling pretty good right now, and we'll keep doing that. Now, what's going on this month? There's not a huge amount. I did say I'd stay at home, so I'm doing that towards the end of the month, and I believe it's just right at the end. I'll be traveling to LA for a few days, up to Anaheim, actually, in California, and I will be doing MLG Anaheim, which is usually a pretty good StarCraft, League of Legends, Call of Duty tournament, and hopefully you will be there. If you are, then by all means, flag me down, say hi, I'll sign whatever you want. I know a lot of people seem to like that for some reason. That is something I'll never get used to. It's like, why would you want me to do that? Are you trying to steal my credit card or something? I have no idea, but whatever the case, people do seem to like that, so yeah, by all means, do say hello. It's the place that I really like to meet people because I actually get the time to do it. Stuff like E3 or PAX is a pretty bad time because usually I'm going from appointment to appointment, but at MLG events we do have some downtime, so I get a chance to go out into the crowd and talk to people, and a lot of really cool people turn up to those events. I don't recall ever meeting someone that I wanted to just go away, so that's always a plus. So hopefully I'll run into a few of you at Anaheim. Feel free to come on by and say hi. Aside from that, we will, of course, at the start of next month, be releasing the Pacific Rim video I was talking about. That lighter take on the universe, as it were. There's some pretty cool stuff going on with that. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the final product, I've got to say. We did a lot of stuff on a green screen, so I have no idea how that's going to look. And then, of course, there was the exterior shoot where you actually had the stuntmen in the Jaeger suits themselves doing the fighting. It's going to be cool, man. It really, really is. And it's probably the coolest thing I've been involved in ever, so that was awesome. And it let me meet someone that I really wanted a chance to talk to, and that was Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorite directors. We did get to sit in a meeting at Warner Brothers with him last month, and we talked through the script, and it was pretty damn funny, I've got to say. It really was. We originally had him cast as the commanding officer, and he was just making jokes saying, it's like, when did you ever hear about a Mexican commander? We were cracking up the entire time. He's got to be one of the most self-deprecating people that I've ever met, but he is so obviously genuinely talented as well as enthusiastic about pretty much everything. And the way that he talked about the film and said, you know, every animator and every filmmaker wants to make a giant robot movie, and everyone's so enthusiastic about making it because it's so cool and they rarely ever get to do that. He said, well, all these 3D artists are usually doing nothing more than animating talking burgers and spinning logos and things like that. So when they get to actually finally make something as cool as that, then they get really into it and give it their all. So I'm really hoping that movie turns out to be awesome. I mean, looks it. Come on, it's giant robots. You know how I get with them. But Guillermo del Toro was, quite frankly, a badass. He still is. And he was really excited about what we were doing as well, which was cool. I suppose that some directors might get a little bit, almost a little bit defensive of their work, but I think that even though he does stuff that's a little bit out there, like, take Hellboy, for instance. It's based on a graphic novel, it's a little bit silly, but the way that he realized the actual world within that and the character of Hellboy was actually really impressive. Particularly Hellboy 2, I thought was absolutely freaking phenomenal. From a visual perspective, it blew me away. And it was not a movie that I expected to actually be any good, and it ended up being great. And then you got stuff like Pan's Labyrinth, which, in my opinion, is a fantastic movie. And then you look at Pacific Rim, it's like, well, it's about giant robots fighting giant monsters. It's about Jaegers versus Kaiju. But he did put some really interesting ideas in there. And that's what's really cool. It's easy to make a cheesy movie. It's difficult to take what some would perceive as a cheesy concept and make it stand out. Make it something that's a little bit different, that's got a little bit of a intelligent spin to it. And that seems to be what he's really, really good at. So, yeah, he was awesome. Meeting him was fantastic. And he was totally up for the idea that we could take his universe and do a bit of a light-hearted spin on it. And I don't know that there's all that many directors that would be okay with that. And yet he was. He was totally up for it. Doing the script reading with him was hilarious. It's like, we got through about 3 lines and then just the entire room cracked up. It was great. Yeah, anyway, so that's what's happening. That's what's going on right now. Pretty happy with it. Very much so. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, folks. I say it at the end of every video. I do mean it. It's not an automatic response. I think the least you can do for taking up somebody's time is to thank them for giving it to you. So, thank you once again for watching, and I will see you next time.